Hello, everyone. The webinar will start in just a few moments. Please be patient. We have people that are still joining. We'll be right back with you. Thanks. Hello, everyone. We're going to start the webinar here in about 1 minute. As a reminder, please click on the link in your registration email to view the webinar and use the audio dial-in instructions. We still have several attendees that are trying to connect. So we'll start here in less than a minute. We'll be right back. Thank you. Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar presented by Protective Insurance Company. Today, we will be hosting Truckers Against Trafficking. My name is Todd Carrier with Protective Insurance, and I'll be the moderator for today's session. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping items to cover before I introduce our main speaker. So first, we will be recording this session today for future availability, and the file will be posted on our website. Secondly, this presentation will last about 45 minutes, followed by open Q&A at the end. Everyone will be on mute during the webinar, and I will not be opening up the phone lines at the end. So if you want to submit a question, you have to use the webinar navigation pane on the right-hand side of your screen. You'll see that orange arrow. If you expand that down at the bottom, there's an option for submitting a question using that navigation pane. Finally, at the end of this webinar, you'll receive a survey, not only at the conclusion of the session, but also via email at the end. We ask that you provide your honest feedback so that we can improve the next session. So I'm going to make sure that all of our speakers here are unmuted and ready to take over. And I'm going to introduce Laura Cyrus from Truckers Against Trafficking. Laura?
Thank you so much, Todd, and good afternoon, everyone. I am so thankful to Protective Insurance for hosting me today to talk about TAT and using this platform to share about the realities of human trafficking and what the trucking industry especially is doing to help combat the crime. Before we get started today, I just want to spend a few minutes here on the front end of my presentation to kind of walk through what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to define human trafficking. We're going to talk about what that is. I'm going to explain what Truckers Against Trafficking is all about, share a few case studies, touch on some laws, and then talk about ways that you and your company can get involved in this work. I would also like to start off by saying I'm going to talk about some uncomfortable things today, including sex trafficking, but all material will obviously be handled in a professional manner. And I do truly believe, and I share this wherever I go to speak, that even though this information may be uncomfortable, it's necessary to hear. And I hope that it challenges you to leave your comfort zone and help us to further this work to help save more lives. So TAT is a grassroots organization based in the Denver, Colorado area. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, and we are all about using targeted systems change and engaging bystander intervention to go after the hearts and minds of this industry in order to raise up a mobile army of transportation professionals that we see as a valuable asset in assisting law enforcement in the recognition and reporting of human trafficking, in order to aid in the recovery of victims and the arrest of their perpetrators. Our training, which I will get into in this session, is provided at no cost. It's an easy lift, it's niche specific, and it's a great way to provide your drivers or anyone in your company with actionable strategies that ultimately lead to the discovery and the disruption of human trafficking networks. So just a little bit about me, briefly. I've been with TAT since 2013, when I began with the organization as an intern while I was completing a Master's of International Human Rights with dual specializations in forced labor, human trafficking, and human rights, and international law and administration at the University of Denver. I also hold a BA from Michigan State University in criminal justice with a specialization in women, gender, and social justice. But the most important thing, I believe, about me is my passion for this issue and engaging those around me in ways to help combat human trafficking. And one of my greatest joys, actually, is helping to light pathways for engagement, whether that's with an individual driver, the owner of a company, a safety director, a shipper, really anyone that touches transportation, and how they can help combat human trafficking. So whether you are related to the trucking or the busing industry, or you're on the call today representing some other industry, or just to learn more, my hope is that you will leave this webinar today feeling empowered with new information, and also, potentially begin to evaluate your own sphere of influence, personally and professionally, and how you can take steps to help combat this crime, both here in the US and across the globe. So what is human trafficking? It is the exploitation of human beings through force, fraud, or coercion for the purposes of commercial sex. You can think prostitution, stripping, pornography, brothels, and most typically pimps, as well as forced labor or labor trafficking. You can think of sweatshops, agricultural fields, domestic servitude, even workers at restaurants, nail salons, massage parlors. Anytime there's a worker that's not being paid for their labor or being held against their will, forced to work long hours, that sort of thing. All of this, both commercial sex and labor trafficking, this is where there's a third party, a trafficker, a victimizer, a person who is in control and making a profit off of someone else's work. This is human trafficking, and it is indeed modern day slavery. Being that we do work a lot within the transportation industry, we like to differentiate the crimes of smuggling and trafficking. When you hear the word traffic or trafficking, a lot of people automatically assume movement, right? But there are some differences between these two crimes, and they are definitely different crimes. So an easy way to think about this, or to explain it to someone else, is to say, smuggling can be thought of as a crime against a border, whereas trafficking is a crime against a person. Let's say you pay someone $3,000 to get you across the border and into this country. In doing so, you've participated in the crime of smuggling. But if you get to your final destination and that coyote or that person that you've paid, turns around and tells you, Laura, the money that you gave me, that $3,000, it's not enough. It doesn't even begin to cover what you owe me. You are now going to be forced to work for me for X number of years or until you've paid off X amount of debt. That is when you've become a victim of human trafficking. So human trafficking can involve movement, but it is not required. For example, we worked with a survivor of domestic sex trafficking a number of years ago that unfortunately was trafficked by her own father when he allowed men to come to their garage and rape her for money. There was no movement in that case, but it was absolutely human trafficking. Oftentimes, to understand an issue, it's good to dispel myths that surround it. And the first myth is that we live in a slavery-free world. A lot of people say slavery is illegal, right? It ended after the Civil War. We just don't have it anymore. But unfortunately, that's not true. We have more slavery today than we have had at any other time in the history of the world. And I'm going to just share a few statistics with you. The first is that there are an estimated 40 million victims of human trafficking across the globe. Human trafficking is a $150 billion a year criminal enterprise, making it the second largest criminal activity in the world. Human trafficking is happening in all 50 states and our nation's capital. There is no zip code that is immune from this crime. It is happening from coast to coast, and it knows no geographic or socioeconomic bounds. Thousands of children are at risk for being prostituted each year in the United States. Of course, we have to consider that our children are the most vulnerable among us, especially those that are coming from homeless or abusive home situations. But again, that's not necessarily a given when we're talking about children that are preyed upon by traffickers. They can come from all types of homes. Lastly, a victim may be forced to have sex up to 20 times per day. And truly, this statistic should read raped up to 20 times per day because that's what it is. Unfortunately, in this day and age, I think there's probably a lot of us on this call that have friends or family members that have been victims of sexual assault or some kind of assault. And, if you consider just what that one instance did to shatter that person's sense of security and self, and just how much it took, right, to overcome that one instance. It's horrible. It's tragic. And you think of the scale of some of these victims, what they're having to endure. Imagine having that happen once a day or 5 times a day, but up to 20 times per day. It's truly, truly traumatic. The next myth that needs dispelling is that all traffickers look like TV pimps, right? When I say the word pimp, an idea comes to your mind, and it might be something similar to this gentleman here, but the reality is traffickers take on many types of appearance and could truly be all around us. On this slide in particular, I want to highlight a few people. The first is the woman in the top right. This was India's Deputy Consul General for the state of New York. She was arrested for trafficking her housekeeper and fraudulently obtaining that staff member's visa. This was a diplomat here in our country. The woman in the top left is a former teacher. We have the man in the bottom right is an Army vet. In the bottom right is a former firefighter, and the bottom left is an Army veteran. So while we think of this, sometimes when we hear the word pimp or trafficker, we really have to consider that just as anyone could be a victim, traffickers themselves take on all types of appearance. The next myth that needs dispelling is this idea of trafficking versus kidnapping, and that all victims of trafficking have been kidnapped. Certainly that happens, but when we're speaking with the trucking industry especially, and we speak with a driver at a truck show somewhere, and they say, well, if they're being held against their will, why can't they just scream for help or run into a convenience store or somewhere else and just ask for assistance? And the reality is that the methods that traffickers use to keep their victims compliant of force, fraud, and coercion are oftentimes much more powerful than actual chains. They don't need physical chains. They don't even need to kidnap. Again, certainly this does happen, but in many cases, victims of trafficking, especially children, have been groomed by their trafficker, and it's someone that they either know or that they have developed a relationship with over the course of time. Just touching on these three tools that traffickers use to keep their victims compliant. When we're talking about force, that's of course anything and everything you can think of, from one-off beatings to brutal assaults. Victims can be raped, gang raped, forced into drug addiction, mutilated, tortured, even killed. Fraud consists of false employment offers or false expressions of romantic interest. Potentially offering an exciting job in a new city, either as a waitress or even a model, or exploiting someone's need for, again, a romantic type of affection or love or caring, fraudulently earning that victim's trust, offering false promises, all those types of things. That's where fraud is present. But without a doubt, coercion is the most powerful means that traffickers use to keep their victims under their control. This consists of threats to life and threats to safety of not only the victim, but also their family member. This could include confiscating identification documents, controlling money, withholding information from the victim so that they become completely dependent on their trafficker. This could be threats to a young mother, that they will call child welfare services and take her child away, or threats to an undocumented immigrant that they will turn this person into immigration enforcement and get them deported if they don't do what the trafficker is trying to get them to do. Perhaps it's telling an insecure teenage girl that they will post a sex video of her online for everyone at her school to see, or for her family to see, if she doesn't do exactly what they say. These are psychological abuses that are so powerful. And here we like to point out that, especially in regard to the federal definition of sex trafficking, force, fraud, and coercion only need to be proved in an adult human trafficking case. Anytime that you have a minor engaged in commercial sex, that person is the victim of human trafficking automatically. It doesn't matter if he or she appears to want to be there or says they want to be there, they're smiling. That's a child, and they need an adult to stand up for him or her and do what they cannot. This is especially true because victims do not always self-identify as victims. They have been completely fooled by their traffickers, and they think that this is what love looks like, right? And that one day it's just going to be the two of them riding off into the sunset, living a life happily ever after. And it does seem strange to us as adults, but when you consider how entrenched these psychological abuses are, and that most victims are young teenage girls and your average pimp is an older adult male, this is an all too frequent reality. Now, these two may be familiar to you, especially if you've been following TAT at all for the last few years, but this is Laura Sorensen and Alder Hodza. They made national news in January of 2015 when they were arrested at a Virginia truck stop where they had parked their RV. That afternoon, officers were called to the scene and they were allowed inside that RV by Sorensen and Hodza, who said that they were on vacation in the area to visit Sorensen's daughter. However, officers noticed that the alleged victim, this third party, this young woman that was in the RV, appeared frightened and exhibited signs of malnutrition. She wouldn't make eye contact with the troopers. Thankfully, one of those troopers picked up on this interesting situation, asked to speak with that young woman outside of the RV. As soon as that door was shut, that young lady began to weep. She begged that trooper not to let her return into the custody of these two, stating that she had been kidnapped out of the state of Iowa 2 weeks prior and that she was being forced to perform sex acts. She was being physically and sexually abused by these suspects. They had withheld food and water from her. She said it had been days since she had had anything to eat or drink. No one in her family even considered her missing because these two were regularly forcing her to call home and communicate to her family that everything was fine, nothing was out of the ordinary. And just to prove how horrific the treatment was of this young woman. These two were heating up metallic instruments on the stove of that RV and inflicting wounds on this young woman's body. They had lacerated her feet, they had branded her, they were spraying chlorine bleach into those wounds, and they had actually slit a dog's throat in front of this young woman and told her, if you don't do what we're telling you to do, this will be you and this will be your family. The day that the state police showed up there at the truck stop in Virginia, that young woman reported that she had been forced to perform sex acts not only on Hodza, but on another man inside the RV that same day, and that encounter had been arranged through a Craigslist ad. This is what sex trafficking can look like in our nation. And so in response to these realities, we recognized that the trucking industry, through their sheer numbers, their extensive travels, and the natures of their job, could provide an extra set of eyes and ears for law enforcement in recovering victims and having pimps arrested, especially since in the course of their everyday jobs, professional drivers are in places where they may come into contact with victims. Some of those places are listed here, but this list is not exhaustive. We have to remember that pimps take their victims wherever they can to make money. That's what this is about for them. They are counting on everyone, truck drivers, general public, all of us, believing that the person that's being sold is quote unquote just a prostitute. If all drivers were trained and knew what to look for and knew how to immediately report it, imagine how many victims could be recovered and how many traffickers could be arrested. That is truly our goal. And so we created Truckers Against Trafficking now 10 years ago. We're celebrating our 10th birthday this year. And our mission is easy. It's to educate, equip, empower, and mobilize members of the trucking and now also the busing industry to help us combat human trafficking as part of their everyday jobs. I want to take you just on a brief tour of some of our programs. The backbone of what we do is truly our industry training program, and that is what we have used to educate hundreds of thousands of folks across North America on this issue. We also provide in-depth law enforcement training in collaboration with survivors that are on our staff to ensure that law enforcement understands a victim-centered approach. We have our state-based initiatives, which have helped to see legislation tying our training to the issuance and renewal of CDLs in various states. We have our Dealership Partners Program, which is helping to enable dealerships across the country to partner with us and become a point of distribution of our materials to the folks that they are intersecting with. We also continue to host successful coalition builds. We actually have one tomorrow in Louisiana. This is where we bring together law enforcement, the truck stop community, trucking companies, and other stakeholders to be trained on human trafficking and learn how they can and really must work together in order to help combat this crime and close loopholes to traffickers. In the last year, we've also seen tremendous growth in our model replication, both internationally and across modes. As I mentioned, we're now working in the bus industry as well as the energy industry, oil and gas specifically. And we have our Shipping Partners Program, which leverages the relationships between shippers and manufacturers being the customer of trucking companies that are moving their goods, and providing those shippers with tools to have conversations in order to basically introduce their carriers to TAT. Lastly is our Freedom Drivers project. Some of you may have had the chance to tour this, but this is a 48-foot renovated show trailer that's a walkthrough exhibit on human trafficking, and it features artifacts from survivors that have been donated to us to help explain the complex push and pull factors about human trafficking and how someone ends up in this life, and really to engage not only trucking, but all kinds of folks, from college students to legislators to folks at state fairs. We take this thing to a lot of places, but really helping people begin to unpack the complex realities of human trafficking here in the United States. To accomplish our mission, we have three goals, and the first is to saturate the industry with our training materials. The primary piece of our training is a 26-minute training video that we would love every truck driver or soon-to-be truck driver in the United States to see. This is a video that we work to get into the hands of safety directors and decision makers at trucking companies, as well as CDL schools. The companion to our training video is what we call our wallet card. And this is a simple bifold little card that we would love to get into the hands of every truck driver in the United States, really in North America. You'll notice on the front this 1-888 number, which is 1-888-3737888. And yes, the number is written that way on purpose. We find that it's easier for folks to remember. That is the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And anyone in the United States that suspects human trafficking is taking place can anonymously and confidentially report a tip to the operators of that hotline. It's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It is staffed by trained operators who can help callers sort of debrief. Okay, what are you seeing? Does this sound like it's human trafficking? Yes or no? If it is, they will relay that information to local law enforcement partners who can then respond to the scene and hopefully investigate that crime shortly after that call is made, which we need to stress. Those calls need to be made immediately because pimps keep their victims in transit. And if a driver or anyone waits, they get 30, 60, 100 miles down the road and their gut is just gnawing at them like, oh, I know something about that wasn't right, but I didn't call. Well, if you're 60 miles down the road in one direction, that trafficker and that victim could be 60 miles down the road in a different direction completely. So those calls must be made immediately. On the back of that card, you'll notice a warning. We're not asking truck drivers to, be Superman and go in and rescue these victims themselves. It's not only not safe for the safety and anonymity of the cab, but also that if you do witness potential trafficking taking place at a place of business, to go in and alert the management of that establishment to let them know what you've seen so that they can be involved in, responding to that crime as well. On the inside of our card, you will find the basic definition of human trafficking and red flags to look for, as well as questions to ask of potential victims. The two most obvious signs are that we're trying to get drivers to remember are anytime you see a minor that you believe is engaged in commercial sex, or anytime you believe you are witnessing someone under the control of a pimp, regardless of the age or gender of that victim. Those are huge red flags, and the hotline should be called immediately. When calling in a tip, sometimes the hotline will instruct the caller to hang up and call 911 because it sounds like there's definitely an emergency situation going on. But more often than not, the hotline operator will again debrief the situation. They will need those actionable information pieces like the make and model of vehicles, any potential license plates, description of the occupants of that vehicle or the suspected victims. All of that information is obviously important in order for law enforcement to investigate and respond to that call. The next piece of our materials is our window decal, which is visible here on the right. And, unfortunately, the stigma around prostitution is alive and real in many circles. And in trucking, we have found this horribly dehumanizing term of lot lizard to be used to commonly describe someone selling commercial sex, potentially at a truck stop or other locations. But it's our hope, again, this is going back to going after hearts and minds, that as individuals become more aware of the realities of domestic sex trafficking, insofar as many of these victims are forced to participate in this crime, that when someone gets a knock on their door or observes a woman or child, honestly, potentially even a man or a boy trying to sell commercial sex, that their first thought would be, I'm looking at a potential victim here. I might be the only way that this person may get out of this situation. I need to make that call. To that end, we have created our own window decal that helps not only keep this hotline number handy, but really keeps this entire initiative at the top of mind of drivers so that every time they're getting in and out of their truck, they're thinking, okay, yes, my main job, deliver my load safely, on time, to be safe, but also I need to be on the lookout for this. Anytime I'm stopped, I need to be scanning my surroundings just to see if there's anyone out there that looks like they may be in need of assistance. One success story that I'd like to share, a case study here of our decal and our training in action. And this is Ballard Truck Arian Taylor, and in January of 2018, he was stopped at a Stockton, California business to deliver his load. He wasn't at a truck stop or a hotel or motel. He was literally delivering his load. It was 3:30 in the morning. He got a knock on his door, only to find a 19-year-old woman standing outside of his truck. She had no shoes, no cell phone, no identification, and he learned that she had literally just fought off the man that was trying to force her into prostitution, and she had been dumped there. She was cold, she was exhausted, she had no money, and she was desperate to get home. Thankfully, Arian had been trained. He knew exactly what to do. They called the hotline together. The hotline was able to get that young woman a prepaid cab ride to a local shelter, that they were also able to arrange a safe place for her to sleep that night, and a chaperoned train ticket home to Denver the next day, where she was reunited with a family member. Arian took care of that young lady until she was safely placed in that cab. He even gave her his personal cell phone in case she needed anything else. And Arian is positive that the TAT decals that were on his window helped to encourage that young woman to knock on his truck and to ask for help. This is the power of being trained to intervene, right? I think in our culture today, we have this this unfortunate reality of all of us kind of just being inside ourselves, or being on our phone, or not being interested in, really getting involved in the lives of those around us if we don't think that it's really, our business. But the reality is we are all in places every day where we could have the potential to make a difference. And thankfully, Arian was aware of that and did take the time to make the call, and was able to help reunite that woman with her family. So in addition to trucking, I also mentioned busing. We recognized that the bus industry is another critical part of our ever-growing mobile army. Through their sheer numbers, their extensive travels, and the nature of their jobs, members of the bus industry can also provide an extra set of eyes and ears for law enforcement. And so we started our Busing on the Lookout program. We have to remember, again, mentioned it before, pimps are going to take their victims wherever they can to make money. They also recruit routinely out of bus terminals and utilize buses for transporting their victims. And when a victim is able to get out of the life, a bus or a bus terminal may be the first place that they go to find safety or escape or a way back home. Between January 2014 and September of 2017, there were 458 cases of human trafficking reported to the National Human Trafficking Hotline that had an intersection with the bus industry. Our Busing on the Lookout, or BOTTLE, as we call it, our BOTTLE program, similar to our trucking, has industry-specific training materials that are engaging the bus industry to train all bus drivers, both commercial and school bus, because we know half of America's children ride a school bus every day, and at times school is one of the last places that these minor victims will be seen before they disappear completely. We also need to be training terminal workers, maintenance staff, dispatch operators, ticket counter personnel. Everybody that could potentially be involved in the bus industry has an opportunity to be a part of this work as well. Just within trucking, if everyone in the bus industry understood the crime of human trafficking and knew how to effectively report it, more victims would be recovered and more traffickers would be arrested. Our second goal is to partner with law enforcement to facilitate the investigation of human trafficking. And we have co-created models, particularly with State Patrol, that are being used in numerous states across the nation. We firmly believe that trucking and law enforcement are partners, right, in closing loopholes to traffickers. And we regularly bring together state, federal, and local agencies, as well as key industry stakeholders, to come together for training and to find those ways to work together. Lastly, our third and final goal is to marshal the resources of this industry to combat this crime. The only way that we can do this work is through our partners, with trucking, with shipping, all numbers of folks within the transportation or that touch transportation who continue to offer their time, their experience, and their influence to help further this work in a myriad of ways. Whether that's training their own employees, encouraging other key industry stakeholders to get involved, or just partnering with us to help get the word out. We are continually grateful for those who help us move the needle, both corporately and as individual donors as well. So I mentioned our state-based initiative into their CDL curriculum, or as part of CDL issuance or renewal. The states of Kansas and Arkansas are the two states where drivers must have a TAT certificate in order to obtain or renew their CDL. And we do see a number of other states here that have passed this at the CDL school level. So it's really a great opportunity for companies and CDL programs to train their drivers and their students and to co-brand certificates with TAT so that when their folks go in to obtain or issue, renew their license, this is taken care of and they can move forward. There are also a number of laws that come into play that carriers should be aware of. We know that human trafficking is taking place in all 50 states, and we know that it's illegal in all 50 states. But it is also imperative to point out that transporting a victim of human trafficking can count as participating in the crime of trafficking and can come with a 10-year prison sentence. It's also substantial to note that in some states, purchasing a victim of human trafficking actually qualifies as participating in the crime, whether you knew that person was a victim or not. So for example, the state of Washington identifies anyone who purchases a sexually explicit act as a human trafficker guilty of a Class A felony. And 31 states have a buyer applicable trafficking law that expressly prohibits the mistake of age defense when dealing with a minor. So someone saying, I didn't know that she wasn't 18, just doesn't cut it. And all of these state laws need to be taken into consideration, especially when considering the law that President Trump signed last year, the No Human Trafficking on Our Roads Act, which places a lifetime ban on a CDL for anyone using a commercial motor vehicle to commit a felony involving a severe form of human trafficking. At the end of the day, we cannot ignore what we call the demand argument. And in the last year, we as an organization have been focusing on demand because we have to be able to communicate to folks that the reality is if there was no buyer, there would be no market for that trafficker to sell their victim, and therefore there would be no victim. Unfortunately, we know that there is a continual demand for commercial sex, but as we have already established, we know that traffickers are in this for the money. And so if the money dries up or the opportunity to make money dries up around this crime, they'll move on and they will find another way to try to make money. We are seeing more and more law enforcement departments becoming trained on the issue of human trafficking and conducting reverse stings that target the buyers and offer services for the prostituted women or victims involved in this. We know that stiffer penalties need to be put into place, that we can't just have a slap on the wrist for men that are charged with this crime. We won't see a diminishment in it until we start to treat it as severe as it is. We know of a particular undercover unit in a state in the Pacific Northwest that will be conducting reverse stings of truck stops over the next few months. Not only could loads be impounded, but if a driver gets arrested, especially if minors are involved or if pimp control can be proven, felony charges could be brought to bear. Again, no buyer means no victim, and we are thankful that law enforcement is, pushing this point. But we also recognize that businesses, even trucking, have an opportunity to help end demand. Part of this simply comes down to educating your folks and looking at this from a risk management perspective. Ultimately, if you have a bad actor in your company, there's not, a way to fully protect yourself. But it does behoove companies to not only assist drivers in getting their TAT certification in states where our training is mandatory, but just to know about this crime and the laws that surround it. We know that TAT is the right thing to do, but when we approach it from a risk management perspective, we do truly believe that carriers would be wise to consider implementing this training for all of their drivers, as well as adopting what we call anti-trafficking in persons policies with a demand reduction focus, essentially prohibiting work time or work product, including cell phones, computers, business trips, prohibiting the use of those to view pornography or to buy commercial sex. In doing so, companies act in good faith with regards to this crime. They're educating their drivers know what to do to help combat this, but it also is helping to create a culture that values the care of people as a sustainability goal, and values, the whole idea of the knights of the road, right? That these folks, these men and women, can absolutely play a huge part in helping to save or change lives. Getting close to wrapping it up here, the most exciting thing, I hope, that I will tell you today is that this program works. To date, truck drivers have made over 2,200 calls to the national hotline and have helped to identify over 1,100 victims of human trafficking. That's calls from truckers alone. And we know that this is only one slice of the data pie. These are only numbers of folks that have called into the national hotline who know to do so and are willing to do so. No one's tracking 911 data or calls made to the local sheriff, non-emergency numbers, but this gives you a little bit of the scope of the problem, but also the impact that truckers can have, that transportation in general can have when they are empowered and equipped to do something. We have now trained over 700,000 members of this industry, but we know that there are millions more that could benefit from hearing our message. This is well, he's now a CFI driver, former Conway truckload driver, Kevin Kimmel. And all of these efforts come back to guys like him and women like him, men and women that are diligently and safely delivering products across our nation. Now, Kevin was at that same truck stop that Laura Sorensen and Alder Hodza had pulled their RV into. And he noticed different men coming and going from the RV to the convenience store. And he thought, that's kind of weird, but he kept doing his paperwork and thought about it some more and thought, well, it's odd that this beat up, weird looking RV is back in the truck lot, and his gut kind of continued to gnaw at him. And it wasn't until he thought he saw a young girl peek her head out of the window of that RV, only to have it violently pulled back in and a commotion ensue inside, that he made that call. And it was his call that resulted in that state trooper coming out and separating that young woman from her traffickers. Today, thanks to Kevin's call, that young lady is at home safe with her family in Iowa, and Laura Sorensen and Alder Hodza were sentenced to 40 and 41 years in prison. Kevin Kimmel and the drivers like him, both trucking and busing, are part of a huge impact. They're making a huge impact and making a difference out on the road. That young woman calls Kevin her guardian angel, and I'm really proud to say that he calls himself a trucker against trafficking. I do have a short video that I would like to share. We've tested this out previously, and I believe that the sound and everything will work fine, but I just want to let you know that there may be a short delay in terms of the sound matching up with people actually speaking, but hopefully it won't be too bad. Let's give it a try.
I finished up night deliveries early in the morning. Ended up finding a truck stop about 40 miles outside of Richmond, Virginia to take my 10-hour break. So I was filling out my paperwork, and 2 flats over there was an RV. This one was back in a truck lot, and it didn't look typical. It was kind of beat up, had black curtains. I saw a middle-aged man walk out and knock on the door. Well, the door opens, he goes in, and I'm still filling my paperwork out. And I looked over, and I saw what looked to me to be a young girl look out. And then she vanished. Like she was pulled away from the window, and the curtain was pushed back over. I thought, this is a bad situation here. Nothing was reminding me of what a family situation would be. And I thought about it another couple minutes, and I said, this could be something pretty ominous. And so I just got the smartphone out, gave him a call, and told him where I was and what I thought might be going on. And not 5 minutes later, 2 sheriff vehicles and 2 state troopers pulled in. And from there, kind of unwound. I feel real good about being able to put 2 people in prison that don't need to be out floating around.
Traffickers have done an amazing job convincing us that she's just a prostitute and that we should just turn and look the other way. And this is a really highly effective business model for them, isn't it? Because we're all looking away, and they are effectively, they and the buyers are effectively raping America's women and children and making a ton of money while doing it. And they've also convinced us that this problem is too big, too dark, and too heavy for us to do anything about it. But they are wrong. If traffickers count on our ignorance and our apathy, that nobody knows and nobody cares enough to do anything about this, then we must know and we must care. And time again, history has borne this out. History has shown that when good men and good women do care and do know and get involved, they can actually change a person's life.
Truckers Against Trafficking is like the glue that's going to bond the industry. You guys are the ones that are putting out the materials. You're putting out all the information. Everybody's got smartphones now. Everybody's on Facebook. I mean, just the sheer barrage of the information has done nothing but good. When they go through the orientation, they see the video, they get the details. They also get the wallet cards. And the wallet cards is just a simple way to refresh your memory about what it is that's going on out there. If you see certain traits, this is the number to call. At the end of the day, you can get your load there, you get it there safe, you get it delivered on time, and maybe you save somebody's life. What I've learned is human trafficking is a huge problem. And now I have an understanding there's an oppressor, there's the oppressed, and they're not doing this to make money for college, or it might be. They're doing this to stay alive because there's somebody on the other end of it forcing it.
That's the power of the trucking industry. That's the power of someone who has the courage to take a second look. And that's what trucking is able to do. That's what taxi drivers or bus drivers or law enforcement personnel or hotel workers, whoever you may be, wherever you are, if you take that second look, then what you're able to do by getting involved is you are effectively helping to change a life. And that's what we're asking for. Kevin Kimmel had the courage to look again. Kevin Kimmel recognized, there's something not right. And he had the courage to make a call and get involved. And now he's helped unlock her pathway back to freedom. No matter what it may look like on the outside, no matter what it may seem like that moment in that parking lot or wherever you may be, that person is a human being. She's so much more. She is not just a victim in that moment, but she is a survivor. She is an overcomer. She is somebody that has a future. And we need the courage to look again. We need the courage to see that our actions in this moment will unlock the path to her freedom.
Well, I got a call from the state police. They wanted to know if I could release my phone number to her. And I said, yeah, that'd be fine. And I think she was still in the hospital. And she told me how much she appreciated it. And she said something to the regards of the guardian angel. And I said, no, that's not the case. I just made a phone call. I'm glad I could help you. And I hope you go on and have a healthy and happy life. Try to put this thing behind you. We need to get back to a place where if somebody is in need, that we step up to it. There's a lot of things in life that aren't so obvious. This isn't one of them. My name's Kevin Kimmel, and I'm a trucker against trafficking.
Um, so if you deliver training online through an LMS provider, we're working with some of the largest providers in the industry, and we can also help you implement this training onto your own LMS if you have one. Love to get wallet cards and window decals for every one of your drivers. Again, there's no cost to any of this. So love to know their numbers. Just once a quarter or a couple times a year, just let us know the updated number of folks that you've trained with TAP materials. It helps us measure our impact across the United States. Next, please consider implementing policies that do help to combat demand, right? Not only implementing the TAT training, but consider an anti-human trafficking in persons policy with a demand reduction focus. Our partners at BEST, Businesses Ending Slavery and Trafficking, have sample language. We have sample language that we would love to provide you for consideration. But that's a big part of this as well. Remember, no market means no victim. Lastly, please spread the word, not only to others that you know within the industry, but take this information home to your dinner tables, to your church groups, to your sphere of influence that needs to hear about the realities of trafficking, specifically children that are in your life. Just a few slides. I know I'm just a little bit over what I had hoped I would be, but we still have about 8 minutes. This in May, and all of the proceeds from this auction will come back to TAT to help further our work. So if your fleet is in the market for a new tractor, I would love for you to consider this. This will certainly be eye-catching as it goes down the road. This is the second iteration of the Everyday Heroes truck. The first was last year, and we are so grateful to all of the sponsors that have helped to build. And lastly, I would like to tell you about our Harriet Tubman Award, investigations being opened or victims being recovered. We would love to know about that. We don't run the hotline, so we don't hear about these cases unless we hear from them from trucking companies or we read about them in the news. So if your drivers have been trained and you know any of them have made a call that have resulted in lives being changed, please let us know, because we would love for them to be considered for this prestigious award. At the end of the day, human trafficking is one of the greatest human rights violations of our time. And I think that we all hope that our will affect change and outlive us, right? That we can leave a legacy. Not everyone is in a position to do that when it comes to this fight against human trafficking, specific to the trucking and the call today, I believe are. You have the opportunity to make an impact and to share this message. I will pass it back over to you.
Thanks, Laura. Such a powerful presentation and important cause. Thank you very much for your time. So at this questions, again, as a reminder, please enter those into the question chat bar on the navigation pane, excuse me. And it looks like we do have a couple here, Laura. So first one is, how do I order any materials or stickers that I can give out to my drivers?
Yeah, lovely. So please send me an email. Just let me know the number of drivers that you have and the best location to ship those to. We're happy to ship them to one central location, or if you have multiple locations, if you get us a list of, all of those addresses and the number of drivers at each site, we'd be happy to get you hooked up with extra materials. We have posters, window decals, wallet cards, DVDs, whatever you need. We would love to empower your people. So just send me an email.
Okay, great. Let's see here. Next question. Will you do company-specific training, and what's the difference between training and certification?
So we have done a few cases of specific company-specific training where we've created special webinars for those companies. Those are pretty rare occasions. It has been done, but I mean, truly, our training video is out of the box. I mean, plug and play. You can push play. You don't have to be an expert on human trafficking. We created it that way because we knew we could not physically get to all of the thousands of businesses across the country, ourselves. The difference between training and certification, it's just a little bit of a fine line. We consider anyone that has viewed the complete TAT training and has a TAT wallet card to be TAT trained. Now we have a certificate program available at education.truckersagainsttrafficking.org that we created sort of in response to this legislation that was passed, so that drivers would have an opportunity to log on, they watch the video, they take a 15-question quiz, right? Normally there's not a quiz involved if you're doing this in person or it's a company directed activity, but for drivers that are doing this on their own, we require a 15-question quiz just so we know you're not pushing play and doing something else in the background. And upon passing that quiz with 11 out of 15 or higher correct, you will be issued a personalized certified trucker against trafficking certificate that you can take in. Now, for companies that have been training in the past, we honor that. We will create co-branded certificates for you. For companies that just want to issue a certificate to all of their drivers, we're happy to create a co-branded certificate for you as well. So it's just a very nuanced difference, but essentially it just comes down to which state you're in and how we can help you complete any requirements that you need to get your CDL renewed.
Okay. Looks like we have time for one last question. What other ways can we get involved? Now, actually, I would add to that question and say, I assume that you will take donations, that you probably encourage people to get involved with local organizations. So what other ways can they get involved?
Absolutely. We have a really cool social media toolkit is what we call it, and I would love to send this. If you're committed to training and you're totally on board with the TAP mission and you want to help us in other ways, I would love to send this social media toolkit to you. It has impact graphics and pre-written tweets and Facebook posts and all kinds of stuff, statistics, and we're regularly updating it and dropping in new graphics and things, but that's a great way to help us spread the word. And we're always looking for ideas too. We have specific pathways for engagement, but if you have an idea or you would like to host a Freedom Drivers Project event at your location, just send me an email, because we're always interested in hearing from you all. You're the experts in your business, and you have different channels and different ways, whether that's sharing newsletters or social media. Yeah, we would just love to partner with you in any way that you think you could help.
Great. Laura, thank you so much. We are out of time. Really appreciate everything that you do for this important cause. So I want to thank everybody for joining. Feel free to contact us or Truckers Against Trafficking directly if you have any further questions. So I hope everybody has a great day. Laura, thank you very much.
Thanks again for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Great. Everybody have a good day, and thanks again for joining. Bye.